Good morning. I feel like I'm a worship leader and I should welcome you to church this fine Sunday morning, but we all know that's not true. My name is Rob Paff. I am a long-term member of this church, 33 years, starting with when my wife drugged me here from Omaha, Nebraska. And it's our church. We love it. And we love the fact that there are people interested in Methodist heritage in the state of Indiana. And as you probably already know, there are a number of notable Methodist, predating the United part, Methodist, Protestant, Methodist, Episcopal, and so on. And you can't leave out the Brethren. Sites all over the state. You know, from DePaul in the Southwest, and here, where you'll learn later today more about the first woman ordained in the Methodist tradition, at least in the United States, and she's just buried about 4 miles from here. But I did want to take this moment to welcome you to our church, and I hope that you have an informative and enjoyable day. First in the morning here in the sanctuary, then lunch, and then over to the County Historical Society, which is not all that far away either. The blessing of a town of 6,000. So let's kick this off with a prayer, shall we? Loving Father, glorious teacher, be with us as we learn more, not just about you, but about our way of worshiping you and how that's changed over time. You haven't. We have. We hope that it's pleasing to you how we have changed over time. And again, time will tell. Be with us as we absorb what we can absorb out of the day. Make it a safe and enjoyable day for all the participants. For it's Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Rob. And I would like to thank not only Rob, but all the people from the church here. Yesterday, it was just a buzz with activity, with people cleaning up, rearranging things, and making us so that we would feel welcome here. We really appreciate their efforts. I want to mention that you are all welcome for lunch. Even if you didn't register, there's plenty of food there. And I want to be sure that you come to the afternoon session. There will be a very big surprise in Lisa Black's talk about Methodist history, and I think you will want to hear it. We aren't going to give you any clues on it either. Can everyone hear me well? Okay, I'm going to start a presentation, and let's see, it said I have to turn it on. I'm not getting it to move. Oh, it did. It moved finally. Maybe it was. Oh, okay. So I figure out which way it goes. Forward and back. Right. Okay. I've got it. Sorry, we had technical difficulty right off the bat. I'm going to be talking about the ties that bind. And really what I'm talking about is the fact that when you are searching through genealogical records and historical records to find things about Methodist history, you find information in the strangest of places. And this hopefully will encourage all of you to go back, look through your church records, but not only your church records, but your library records, genealogical society, historical society records, to find out more about the church and the things that the church has participated in over the years. And I'm going to start with a story that you're going to wonder what in the world this has to do with religion or the Methodist Church. But we're going to talk about the Council of National Defense. Remember, this took place in 1918. We were in World War I, and the Council of National Defense and the related Food Administration were basically running everything in the country. And a lot of people didn't realize it. You saw the effects of it, but the people didn't realize what was going on, actually. I have a list of almost 40 different leaders of different activities that were going on during the war. The Council of Defense was organized at the national level, then at the state level, then at the county level, and even down to the township level in Jasper County. In big cities, they might be organized in a block level. These are some of the functions they were controlling. Farming. They told farmers what crops to plant, when to plant them, when to harvest them, when they could, what they could pay to have somebody work for them. They were in charge of fuels and transportation. Remember that they were shipping goods and soldiers from one end of the country to the other end of the country. And so you, as a business owner in this county in 1918, probably had to close your store early because it was dark. Once it became dark, if you were a restaurant, you wouldn't be serving the evening meal because that would use fuel for electricity. There were some days they closed the stores. It affected the books you could read. They literally went into our libraries and to our schools, which shows up in the school records, that they went into the schools and they took out anything that could be considered pro-German literature. They eliminated German-speaking newspapers when there were hundreds of them around the country. They eliminated teaching of German in the schools. In Rensselaer, they had German language was the main language that the students would study. And they had to get special permission to finish a semester of German language, or they would have had dozens of kids not be able to graduate. And this is in the school records. We found this information, plus in the newspapers. Grocery prices, there were a lot of foods that you could not buy. Bakeries had a price and a size of loaf of bread they could make, and they could only make the bread out of certain products. They couldn't use wheat, so buckwheat and rye, and that became very popular at the time, whether people liked them or not. That was your only choice. Cornmeal was great at the time. So we're going to go on here. One of the good things the Council of National Defense did was conduct a survey of women. They had a subsidiary called the Women's section of the Council of Defense, and they registered millions of women from around the country. Now, they did this from New York to California. They had a standardized card in which the women were to be registered. Not everybody used a standardized card. In New York, they registered women along with a survey of men who were registering for war service. So they had a totally different card than we used here in this county. In the South, a lot of the states were just still upset over the Civil War, and they didn't believe in cooperating with the government on anything. So the women's surveys down there might cover 10 to 20, 30% of the women, but that was all. Indiana ordered 700,000 cards. That's not anyways near as many as Michigan and Illinois ordered. Those three states, though, were the most organized states in conducting this survey. Indiana had over 600,000 women. It was like 660,000, something like that. They did a tremendous job of conducting this survey of women. Miami County in Peru at the museum and Jasper County here at our local museum are only counties in Indiana that still have these registration cards. I think for many people may have them still, but not know that they have them. I've talked to county historians who say they have boxes of stuff in their museum that they have no idea what's in them. Most of the cards were kept in libraries or museums. We are very fortunate. We found 3,200 and some cards, and then recently had another 300 cards returned to us. So that pretty much gives us back all of the cards for Jasper County women. We did find out there were no questions on religion on these cards. So you're probably wondering what the connection is. Well, for one thing, we found a list of women who refused to register, and everyone on that list is a German Baptist. We had 2 German Baptist groups in our county, and they were not pro-Germany. And we were very fortunate to have a common sense minister at the Presbyterian Church who talked with them and found out why they wouldn't register, because it was not politically correct to not complete the survey. Well, it turns out, of course, they had come from Germany. They were escaping religious persecution. So they were not pro-German, but they were anti-war. And to them, having the wives fill out a card was like participating in the war efforts. So that, when we went on after learning this, to find out a lot, and we happened to be able in touch with a 95-year-old historian from the German Baptist Church. And he gave us the names of all the different ministers of the German Baptist Church over the years, and a lot of the names of members of the church. We found out a tremendous amount of information, but that's not the important thing to me about this survey. We also found out a lot about the Methodists, because I was looking at the cards and I saw a lot of women coming to Rensselaer who were single, and they had addresses like Lisle, Illinois, Dayton, Ohio, Hancock, Maryland. There was another little town in Illinois. It turns out that when I pulled the cards, there was something in common from all of them. Up on the right side of these cards, oops, I put it down, sorry. It says, for this one, Maud Simons was a deaconess, teaching and mother work. All of them said something like superintendent of the school or working at the children's home, something similar, or they were deaconesses. Well, it turns out anybody that said that was a deaconess. And then they all says by whom employed. It was either Manette School or the Methodist Episcopal Church. And then the third thing that was in common with these cards, again on that top right corner, it says Christian service, specialized training, Christian service or Bible or something similar to that. All of these women were deaconesses of the Methodist Church. And before I talk about the deaconess a little more, I'm going to go over this card to show you what was going on. The first section, top left corner, you've got their address, how old they were. And the reason I showed this one is to show you that we also had deaconesses here at this church in Rensselaer. There was a big group of them. This woman was single, and she was willing to volunteer for any length of time for war service. Down at the bottom of the card are some categories of public service, professional, and domestic, agricultural skills. It shows some of the skills the women had. They could circle the skills or underline what they would like training in. Now, across the top, there were originally 10 tabs across the top of those cards, and each tab tied in with a category down below. After they collected all these cards, they determined what were the important skills of the women, and then they kept those labels up there. So they could, if they wanted somebody with nurses training, they knew they had to go through, look at a particular tab and find somebody with nurses training, or a woman that drove a car. In the middle down, okay, I guess see how this works. I'm not finding the laser thing. But anyways, look at number 94, languages. Foreign languages, read well or speak well. We learned who could speak a foreign language and what language it was. The information on these cards is fantastic. Now, let's go to the next one. This is the back of the card. And they just simply wanted to know the personal equipment of the women. I thought that was an odd way, but their health, their physical defects, their voice, their sight and hearing. So we often learn if a grandmother was deaf, blind. Physical defects, though, is the one that interests me most, and a lot of the people that study this are very interested in finding out about physical defects. They weren't supposed to be listed on the card. They were just supposed to be checked that they had physical defects, and the defects were supposed to be written on another piece of paper. Well, and they, with their name and address, and they were supposed to keep those in a separate file. Well, fortunately for us, a lot of the cards have a paper attached to them that tells what the physical defect is. Whether somebody is senile or has 3 tumors on their face or is limp because they were struck by lightning. Sometimes they actually, in the area for remarks, would write down what the physical defect was. There were a lot of eugenics studies going on during World War I. So everybody wonders what they really intended to do with this information. Now, going back to the deaconesses of the Methodist Church, the earliest group of deaconesses I could find was a group that was in Boston. It was started by the wives of 2 missionaries to India. And the purpose of a deaconess was to dedicate their life to Christian service. And these 2 women actually convinced 2 other people from their group to go to India to serve the Lord. And over the years, you can see the Methodist Women's Foreign Missionary Service was started. The Brethren Church started a group. Then the Methodist Protestant Church did. There were numerous what called home missionary societies where they would do work locally as opposed to going overseas. And then you had the Women's Missionary Society in the Evangelical Church. And now all of these groups, of course, eventually became Methodist, United Methodist, and today we call the women United Women in Faith. We used to call them Women's Society of Christian Service. Over the years, the name has changed several times. So here again is another card, and this is Ollie Tanner, another Rensselaer woman, and she lists her name as occupation of a house mother of children's home, and then lists she is employed by Manette School, and that she does Christian work, and in parentheses, Bible. She is another deaconess who was here from this town, and she herself would later go to India as a missionary. So I wanted to show her card to show that we were well involved in this. The school they're talking about is the Methodist Home for Girls. The land and home were donated by Cordelia Manette to the Methodist Episcopal Church, or to the deaconesses of the Methodist Episcopal Church, in 1908. For 2 years, it was run as a home for girls. And in 1910, it was fully accredited as a school for girls. And it was once known as the only Protestant elementary school for girls. Now, there were Catholic schools for girls. I know Quakers had schools for girls early on. I don't know that it was, truly the only school for girls, but it was very rare to have a school of this type. It continued as a private school. I think the Methodists ran it up into the 20s. And then after that, it became a private school and ran until the 1950s. And I do want to emphasize that it was not an orphanage, and it was not a home for troubled girls. We have a lot of stories that have been written in. A lot of letters and photographs have been sent to the museum. And it was basically a case of maybe a mother would die, the father was working, needed somebody to take care of his girl. We know of one father whose daughter was here for several years, and he was so proud of the work that was done at the school with his daughter that he donated new lighting to for a couple of rooms in the school. I know of other cases. There was one where a father remarried, and he married a young woman with 3 little tiny kids. So the older girl was kind of left out by the new stepmother. And so he brought his girl here. Okay, this is an old ad for the school, and it lists the fact that it was accredited by the Department of Education, and it was a boarding school for girls for kindergarten through 8th grade. The purpose of the school was listed as, our effort is to place equal emphasis upon the creation of a happy home life and the best in educational advantages. So they had these teachers coming, and there was always a piano teacher, it seemed like there, piano or music teacher. This is the original building that Cordelia Manette donated. It was a big old farmhouse. And this had a wing added onto it. Now, I'm not sure which side was the wing there. But anyways, this was located on College Avenue and, was that Grove Street? I couldn't think for a second there. But anyways, that photo was taken in 1913. And in 1925, a brick building was built. And this was known as Rensselaer Hall. That building still exists. Unfortunately, it's under private ownership, and they have been letting it fall apart. We keep hoping somebody will get this and build it up, but you can go by and drive by this. If you're going south out of town, you'll pass it, look on the side street, and you can find it. Going to show you some things that we've found over the years about Manette School for Girls. They published a newsletter called the Manette Breeze, and we only have 2 of these newsletters. We know that 700 to 800 were sent out around the country every year, every quarter. So a lot of people have these somewhere. We'd love to find, if you ever find one, let us know, because they tell so much information about what was going on in the school. And they had a special section in which the alumni could write back and tell what was going on in their lives. So you hear from some of the former teachers. You hear a lot of them are from former students who will write in and say, I graduated from high school, or I got my first job, I was married, had my first child. So they're fascinating newsletters. I have been keeping an index of people that went to the school, and so far I have over 500 names, but I know that's a long way from the total number of kids that attended that school, in the 40 years it was open. And I'd love to have more, so if you find any newsletters, be sure to let me have a copy of them. We have a lot of advertising brochures that they published over the years. We have newspaper articles telling about the school. And then the photos there are class photos from the 40s that we have. And other people have just sent in individual photos of, somebody that they knew attended the school. They had regular subjects, your reading, writing, arithmetic type of things. We know that they had religious studies because so many of the deaconesses were involved in that. They all had jobs, and they seemed to be done based on the child's age and skills. One lady told us that she remembered having to dust the spindles on the stairway going upstairs. You know, I mean, these weren't necessarily hard jobs, but it was teaching kids the value of work. And they also said that when the girls got in the fourth grade, they had to learn how to do dresses, iron them. They didn't want the younger kids touching the irons. The kids had 3 dresses. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday was one. Thursday, Friday, Saturday was another one. And Sunday, they had their Sunday best dress. And the older girls would have to iron one dress for the younger girls. I don't know, one of the workers evidently did the rest of the dresses for them. Each of the kids came up to this church on Sunday morning for services. They would be assigned a partner to walk together with, and they would come up here. So the Methodist church records are full of the names of people who went here. We find the names of the deaconesses who transferred their memberships from wherever they served before to here, and then you would find maybe a transfer paper that showed where they were moving to next. I know one of them went to the Methodist Hospital up in Gary after leaving the work at the Manette School for Girls. They had a family day. It was supposed to have been every other Sunday, but from what I've read, a lot of families came every Sunday. And then, of course, you had some families that didn't come very often, which happens in a case like this. And some of the families that did come would take another girl or two with them to lunch on Sunday dinner. They had special events. I know one thing I could tell about fall nights, but I forgot to tell you that one of the girls didn't mind drying dishes, but she hated the fact that she had to go downstairs in the basement to hang the towels up when she was done. But they had a couple of nights every fall where all the girls were down in the basement. The big door to the furnace would be opened up, and they would roast hot dogs in the furnace. And that was one of their exciting events. Another couple of girls reported that they loved having this certain room in the... welcome, Arlen. They loved having the certain room in the house because it was the first one to see the ice cream truck that came. So evidently they got to get treats from the ice cream truck. One of the girls remembered hearing Roosevelt's Pearl Harbor speech and how shook up the kids were when they heard that. And one of the deaconesses led them in prayer and got them calmed down because some of the girls were crying and scared from that. And then they had piano recitals on a regular basis, and you see reports from them in not only the newsletters, but in the Rensselaer paper that would usually be shown. Okay, now, what are some of the things you can find in the regular Methodist records? And we will have on display over at the museum copies of this church's records. And we have copies of the Lee Church, which was a small country church. You list births and baptisms. They have sections for full membership, people who are probationers who will soon, in the process of becoming a member, and new members. They have membership transfers. Sometimes they're listed in these Methodist ledgers. Other times they're separate pieces of paper. And I know that we copied about 800 or so of those, and I still have another 700 or so to still photograph or scan. Membership papers are really interesting, or the transfer papers are very interesting, because it will list the whole family that was involved. And sometimes, if you're a genealogist looking at them, you see a person in the family that's missing. So you start looking, are they in a cemetery here in town and weren't able to move on? Or maybe it was a daughter or son got married and they're staying in this town with their family while the rest of the family moves on. They list weddings, and it didn't matter. It wasn't just church weddings. They could be married in a bridal center, in a home, in the parsonage, wherever. Those will be listed. And of course, the deaths are listed. A lot of times, family addresses are there, and that could be prior addresses, where they came from, their address where they're here at the church, and maybe their address where they're going to when they move next. So there's a lot of good information. This is one of the records of Manette baptisms. And you'll see some, in the second column, you see where it says Manette School. Those are one of the places I found names for Manette students being baptized. There is another interesting one that I found the other day where the Methodist minister recorded the baptisms. He performed them, but he did it at the Christian church. And I was wondering why they were performed at the Christian church instead, but I noticed that it said 5 of the girls were sprinkled. Traditional Methodist baptism. 2 of them were immersed. So my feeling is the Christian church had a baptismal pool where they could immerse the kids. Oh, wait a minute. These don't show up too clear, but these are a couple of the marriages that I thought were very interesting. And this young couple came to town to be married by Tom McCoy, who was the mayor. The mayor had promised them, since they didn't have any money, he would marry them for nothing. When Tom wasn't there, they went to the Methodist church, told the minister their story, and asked if the preacher would do the same. And over in the side he wrote, "I did." This is a sadder story in this one. Nicely Bennett and Emily Nicholson were married in 1887, and afterwards a note was added that both were killed instantly in 1892 by being struck by the cars near Rensselaer. That's a sadder one, but that's the type of information you probably won't find anywhere else about your relatives if you're doing research. Okay, transfer records. I kind of covered this already. I get a little bit off on my, I've talked about this stuff. But they provide a lot of good information, new locations, deaths sometimes. They sometimes are identified as deaconesses and being transferred to another place. Miscellaneous information in church ledgers. Wealth of information. We have a lot of records of small community churches being built and what it cost, who the trustees were of the churches at the time, that type of information. We have a lot of information about Sunday school classes. Now, in recent years, it'll tell each of the Sunday schools and where they met within the church. But in olden times, remember, Sunday school classes were not in a church building a lot of times. So you find where the people were meeting. And usually they're in homes or schools. And the nice thing about it is when they're meeting in a home, in genealogy, they have a thing called a fan club, family and neighbors. You want to research and find out who their family members were and their neighbors were. Sunday school class included people who were living close together. And oftentimes, if you see a Susie in there and the family had a daughter, Susie, you better check that last name because it's probably their daughter and son-in-law that are attending with them. Good genealogical information and fun to know. We have a lot of information about ministers. And for this church, we actually have somebody put together a scrapbook of all of the ministers. And you can see that this afternoon over at the church. There's some interesting stories there. You know, we've got Roger dressed up as George Payne today. And so you'll be here when you go over to the church. He's going to be greeting us, and we'll hear a little bit about George talking. And then we got one book that has a letter slamming the record keeping of prior ministers. Some of the ministers evidently didn't do a good job, and this minister pasted over some of the pages. And I'm not sure why. So if anybody knows how to unglue pages without damaging the information that's underneath it, let me know, because I'd love to be able to take those parts, because I can see that there are names under there that we'll have to work on that one. Now, this is something that you may not have in your records, but we do. And it's Mrs. Griswold's Hair Restorer. And this will guarantee you to put hair on absolutely bald heads. It's very interesting. I didn't know what cantharides are, and I still don't really know, but I know they are something that can burn your skin if you leave it on too long. I also noticed that it had oil of bergamot in it. Now, oil of bergamot, does anyone know what oil of bergamot? Some of you may be drinking oil of bergamot and not even know it. It is the main flavoring ingredient in Earl Grey tea. And I love Earl Grey tea. When I went to Alaska one time, my daughter-in-law knew that I loved it, and she found some double oil of bergamot tea for me. I drank a whole bunch of it, and then we were outside in the hot sun and everything. Well, the next morning, I couldn't even get myself out of bed. I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy. I was so swollen up, I couldn't bend my knees, bend my arms. You couldn't even see that there was a space between my fingers. And fortunately, when they rushed me to the hospital, one of the things the doctor asked me was, and I was going, or no, you know, and he asked me if I had had any Earl Grey tea. He knew the type of reaction it could cause. So I'm very careful about drinking Earl Grey tea when I'm not going, I make sure I'm not going out in the sun. And they used to make, Marshall Fields used to make a wonderful smelling aftershave with it. And it was wonderful, but I know my husband couldn't wear it when he was out in the sun, or his face would get all red. So, I mean, there's surprises galore in these records. And do we have any questions? Just go and dig in your records, see what you can find out.
You talked about the cars. What type of cars you guys did when that young couple was killed?
I don't know, just early cars were coming out about then. There were some small, groups manufacturing, hand building some cars.
Has it been interurban train? I just wondered.
I don't know. I think it would have been an early automotive type thing.
I thought the date was late 1800s. I don't think it's 92.
Yeah.
That's why I think it would be like an interurban sort of thing. Okay, thank you.
Well, any other questions?
I thought it was interesting that the first paper you put up had date 4/27/18. Today is 4/27.
Oh, okay. I didn't even notice that. Okay. And I did not thank Rita for playing the organ for you. I hope you enjoyed it. She's very talented. We were sorority sisters in college. More years ago than we want to remember. I've known her for a long.
I was the oldest one here, and then I realized she and Judy, a few months older.
We're all pretty close. Okay, we're a little bit early. I didn't quite talk as long as I thought I might. We're only 8 minutes early for our break. If anybody wants to take a break and use a restroom and just stretch your legs a minute, and then we'll have Steve Riikonen from the Bashor home. I'm really excited to hear his talk. And those of you from Rensselaer should be very proud because Rensselaer Rotary is one of the district clubs that's working on a project to raise money for the Bashor home. And they gave Rotary a list of about $57,000 worth of equipment or whatever they needed. And the last I knew, Rotary already had 54,000 of it, so I'm sure by now they probably have raised the whole amount. And that's, there were 50-some groups in the district, each contributed toward it.
So do you have training in this genealogy work, or is this just a love of yours that you got into it?
I am not a registered genealogist. I have just been doing it for at least 50 years, probably 60, because my husband and I started doing it right after we were first married. I love doing it. I am on the board of the Indiana Genealogical Society, so I love it. But even if you aren't a genealogist but you're interested in your own family history, it's fun to see their names in these books. Okay, well, take a break here. Okay, can we gather for our meeting? We want to hear the talk by Steve on Bashor home. Hopefully we'll... Are there any more to come back? Okay. Well, anyways, Steve Riikonen is here from Bashor home. And Steve, I left my paper at home that had your information on it. So I'd appreciate if you just tell them a little bit about who you are and your background. And I think you will enjoy this talk.
Why do I have two eyes? As my heritage, my background is from Finland, and Finnish last names many times have two vowels at the beginning, and will end with NEN. And so that is just a commonplace there. I want to first thank Sue for having me here. I love sharing about Bashor Children's Home, and an opportunity like this is just a wonderful opportunity to be able to share about the work that's being done up in Goshen. Today we're going to watch a video kind of the timeline of Bashor Children's Home. Last year we celebrated our 100th year anniversary, and so we kind of put this together just to kind of give you a little bit of a feel for what's happened over the last 100 years, and then I'll go into a talk, and at the very end we'll have a little bit of time for questions, so please watch. That was about 100 years in about 5 minutes. Phew! What a trip, huh? I think one of the neatest things about Bashor and about any nonprofit organization, and as we was talking about the Historical Society, that John and Emmeline Bashor, during their lifetime, you saw the original farmhouse that they had, and they had added on to it, and they had taken in orphans. They had no kids of their own, but they wanted to help kids, and they had this dream and this vision at their death that would continue to happen. And so they left the farmhouse and the 160 acres of land that we have to, as you saw, the Episcopal Deaconess Church at the time. And here it is. And so Emmeline was second to die. She passed away in, I think, 1916. And we started in 1923 when they got all the paperwork done as an orphanage like they wanted. And we continued the work that they were doing in the farmhouse that they were doing it in. And I think the neat part is that 100 years later, we're really staying true to what their wishes were. We're not an orphanage anymore. We're a residential facility, but we're still taking care of kids. And that's what they did, and that's what they wanted to continue. So for 100 years, think about a vision that you have, a dream that you have in your life, something that you want to continue, that it would still be going on 100 years from now. And right now, we're making plans to be doing this 100 years from now. I mean, we're continuing to do things. And if you saw the evolution through all those different things that were opening up and buildings that were being built and programs that were being started, I'm going to quickly talk through all those things. And so in 1923, we opened up and started a nonprofit organization, Bashor Deaconess Orphanage, and we took in orphans. And so we had people that lived in that house and had all the kids there, and they worked on the farm, and there was a school just down the street that they went to during the day, and they came home and they worked on that farm, and they lived in that house. And we operated that way up to World War II, and you saw that we closed down for a bit in World War II, as many things in the country did. I mean, they shut down a lot of things, and we shut down the orphanage and reopened right after the war was over. Reverend Purdy, who was the district superintendent at the time, got some people from Trinity United Methodist Church in Elkhart, and they say they came and cut down all the weeds and took all the plastic off all the furniture and reopened. Because at that time the church had some conversation about, do we need it? We got a children's home in Lebanon. Do we need another one? And that yes, it was a vital part of the church mission, and that we should continue. So they came and reopened. And it operated as that orphanage up until the late 60s, early 70s. When in this country we said we're going to do away with orphans. We're not going to have orphans in this country anymore. What these kids will become is wards of the state, and the states will take responsibility for these kids. And so they created residential facilities, and we evolved. We built those 4 cottages, and we became a residential facility. So now the state had these kids that they were responsible for, and they just, here, take care of them. And it was very cookie cutter. I mean, you were taking care of kids, you were watching them, providing for their basic needs. And now residential care from the early 70s until today has evolved to be very, very specialized care for kids. Okay? And so one of the things that started to happen was, as we were taking care of all these kids, well, we needed to provide education for them while they were with us. Up and prior to that, they were going to the public schools. And would be bus. You saw the bus there. It was a Bashor home on it. It's actually Bashor's bus. They came and picked up all our kids and took them to the Wani public schools. But as the evolution came and we had more kids that were getting specialized treatment and had more problems, we needed to provide the education for them. The public schools didn't want our kids anymore because they were kind of troubled kids. And so we started to provide educational services for them. And we started to do that really well. So then the public school said, hey, you guys are doing that really well. You want to take some of our troubled kids and take them and help them? And so they started to bus their kids to us. And so now we have an educational program that works with kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. So we have an elementary program, and then we had an alternative school for the older kids. And these are all kids that are not equipped, don't behave correctly, typically have multidisciplinary problems. They're ADHD, they're ADD, they have lots of different letters that they put after their name when they're talking about them, because they have lots of different problems that they have in their lives. And typically, they've all been subject to some form of abuse, as with all of the kids that we work with. Typically, all of our kids have been abused. And so when we talk about our different programs in our residential, and that's what we're really well known for, is residential care for kids. So we work with kids typically anywhere from 7 to 20. We have a variety of programs, and I'm going to kind of just walk through them. We have a homeless shelter, which I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit here. Our HOPE program, which works with young boys between 7 and 13, who are what the technical term is, they're sexually maladaptive. And so what that means is they've sexually acted out in the community. Okay? And so when a 9-year-old sexually acts out in the community and violates someone, has sexual abuse on someone, it is because they have been sexually abused themselves. I tell people, I said, at 9 years old, I was trying to think about my history and my life, and at 9 years old, I was probably playing with army men in the mud and eating more mud than anything else. I wasn't sexually acting out. I wasn't abusing anyone, just because I had not been abused myself. And so I didn't know that, because it's a learned behavior. And so we bring these boys in and we work with them on what's proper, what is, and help them overcome the abuse that they endured. So then from that program, we have boys and girls programs for addictions. Those are 13 to 19, 20 years old. We have boys and girls who are 13 to 19, again, that have behavior problems, have gotten in fights, just an array of different problems there. What else we have? Okay, well, we have foster care program. You saw that. Most recently, so I'm going to go back to, we had originally had a homeless shelter for kids, and it wasn't used very much. And the state would place kids in it that were in transition. They were coming out of the court system, going to be placed in residential care, but maybe that spot had not opened up yet. So they would place them in our shelter. That's what we called it. And then as the administration changed in Indianapolis, and they said, well, we're going to try to cut costs, and we're not going to place these kids, and we're not going to do this. And so we had no kids coming in, and so we had closed our shelter for a few years. And then there was a big outcry up in Elkhart County that said we had a young man that died, 16-year-old boy died. He was homeless and was couch surfing and ended up staying in an abandoned building and froze to death one night. And so there was a big outcry. We can't have this happen. And the thing is that when you're 16, you're not allowed into the homeless shelter because you're not old enough. They only work with adults. And anytime you're working with kids, there's a problem. So we attended quite a few meetings, community meetings, and a lot of people, we had a lot of churches that said, well, we'll do something, we'll open up, and we'll be a place. But there's so many regulations regarding working with children that you have to follow that are state regs. And so after listening to all this stuff and talking to all these people and being in all these meetings, the best place to open a shelter was going to be a Bashor, and for us to reopen the shelter. Because we had already dealt with all the state regs, and we could just pretty much flip a switch. And so we renovated a building and got it all ready and opened up the shelter. And we opened it up on Monday, and Friday it was full. And it's pretty much been full since then. Wow. Isn't that crazy? Why do you have a homeless kid? That was the first thing that went through my mind. Why do we have homeless kids? Why aren't their parents taking care of them? And then as we started to see these kids, we started to say, well, they run away from abusive homes. And they figure it's safer on the street than it is at home. Wow, scary, isn't it? Another common thing that we started to see was young girls coming to us, and as we started to hear their story and talk to them and get to know them, we found out that they were survivors of human trafficking. And I point out the word survivor because that is what they would like to be called. Most of us would know them, and people talk about them as victims of victims of human trafficking. And we work with them, and they go, I don't want to be a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I've gotten through this, and I've gotten past this, and I'm moving on, and I'm no longer a victim. And so you'll hear me emphasize the point survivor because we want to change that wording throughout the state, throughout the community, throughout the world, and have them be what they want to be. They want to be survivors. So we started to talk to these girls and get to know them, and we saw this common theme that, wow, what you've been through is not, I mean, it's traumatic, but it is part of human trafficking. And we started to see this common theme. So we had a building that was open. We had a girl in it that was very traumatized, and we had this building open just for her, and we'd have 2 or 3 staff with her. That she had just graduated. She'd been with us about 7 years. And we had finally just moved her back down to the cottage with all the other girls. And so we had this empty building, so we decided to start a program to give help to these survivors of human trafficking. And again, we opened it on Monday. On Friday, it was full with 8 girls. That's how many beds we had. The next Friday, we had 13 girls on a waiting list to get help. And so we went on and we looked at it and worked with the state, and the state said, well, yeah, we've got plenty of girls. We have hundreds of them that need help. And so we went on a building campaign, and we opened up a new building that had 30 beds in it so we could provide help for more of these survivors of human trafficking. And so I'll give you a few facts on human trafficking because that is probably, one of the, hot buttons. It's so, we don't want to believe that it's happening here. We think it's happening overseas and in third world countries. So here's just a couple of quick facts. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity in the United States. It is the second largest criminal activity in the United States behind drugs. And they expect in the next 5 to 10 years that it will surpass drugs as the number one criminal activity in dollar amount.
Is that only girls or is it also boys?
It's also boys. And when they figure trafficking, they also look at job trafficking because they're figuring in people that are being smuggled into this country under labor. And so trafficking is a wide range. We work with just young girls, 13 to 18 years old. Most trafficking of young girls is done by family members or people they know. We had a young girl that was kicked out of the car on the toll road. We're up in Elkhart County, and the toll road goes right through, and there was a guy, and he had 3 girls with him, and the girl started to complain about her stomach didn't feel very good, and she was in pain. And so he pulled over on the side of the toll road, kicked her out of the car, and just kept on his way. Because it was cheaper for him to buy a new girl, they were on their way to Chicago, than to take her to the doctor. Because he could buy a new girl for $90. It's the average price of buying a girl. And it's happening right here. It's happening in Indiana. It's happening in northern Indiana. Most of the kids that we worked with, and we probably served, 100, 125 by now, all coming from the north part of the state. It's happening in the middle part of the state. It's happening all throughout this country. It's an epidemic. It's a plague. And we have to have awareness of it, and you have to look for it. You have to take action. Don't say, wow, I wonder, that's really weird that girl has a Gucci handbag. She's not from a very rich house. Why would she have a Gucci handbag? Or why would she have motel keys? One of the girls we found had been handcuffed to a bed in a motel for a year. That's the horrific life. And at Bashor Children's Home, what we're going to do is we're going to work on healing their mind, their body, and their soul. And one of the challenges I would have is to say, how do you talk to that girl and tell her that God loves her, that God has a plan for her, and that there's a better thing out there for her, and all you have to do is believe. And she says, but look what he did, and that happened to me. So we have a big task ahead of us, but we're very, very successful at it. We are helping hundreds and hundreds of kids every day. We have a strong foundation that John and Emmeline Bashor left us as to what they want us to do, and we just continue to look for ways to serve kids and help kids in a residential setting, in an educational setting. The unique thing is that we're well known for being a residential facility. And we put a lot of resources towards keeping kids out of residential care. We want to help teach them in school and work on those problems so they don't get into residential care. We have a whole array of about 9 or 10 different programs to help keep kids out of residential care. If they get caught shoplifting or they have truancy problems, or they get into minor trouble. We have a teen court program. All these things are set up to keep kids out of residential care and put us out of business over here, because this is not the best place for kids, and that's what we want is the best thing for kids. Okay? So that's about 100 years. We got about 5 minutes left for any questions, because if I have not answered all your questions already and you have some, I don't want you to go home without them being answered. Where's our funding come from? Well, as we talked about, the state has taken responsibility for these kids, so they give us a per diem to take care of them. Okay? So what happens is we fill out a cost report that says what we spent on kids 2 years ago. And then they say, okay, well, that averages out to be X number of dollars per kid, and that's what we will pay you 2 years from now. Pretty neat way to handle a business, huh? And so we do fundraising. The church supports us. We do other events. We do mailings, and we raise $1 million to $2 million every year in financial support to help offset that obvious loss of 2 years of inflation and cost of living. And then to do some of the new programs, we have to fund that ahead of time. We do fundraising to raise money to build these new buildings that we're building, because the state will not pay for that. They'll just pay for the care. But we do a tuition transfer for the kids in our educational programs, where the schools will give us a part of what they get. You know, they got 25 kids in a classroom. We have 5. We have a teacher, we have an assistant teacher, and we have a therapist. For those 5 kids, they had one teacher for 25 kids. They give us part of the money that they get for the kids that we're teaching. Another question behind you, sir.
How long does a survivor of trafficking usually stay in your program?
About 9 months. Our kids, if you're in our addictions program, it's about 6 months. If you're in our sexually maladaptive program, it's about 18 months. Because our survivor program is just kind of still fairly new, it's been about 9 months that we've been able to help those girls transition out. Ma'am. First question's free. Second one costs you.
Okay. The number of staff you have.
Number of staff we have. We have about 180 staff right now, full-time staff. So, and we have about 60 to 70 kids that live with us. We have another 60 or 70 kids that are in our education, and we have another 100 or so every week that we're working with in our community-based services and our day programming side of things.
What happens to those that transition out of the programs you're talking about, specifically the addictions and is there some, once they've been so immersed, what happens to them?
Okay. Did everybody hear that question? What do we do with the kids as they transition out when they're getting ready to leave? Our discharge planning starts on when they first get with us. So we're going to set a discharge plan when they first arrive on our campus and work towards that. And it all depends on what their situation is. If they're going to be able, they're going to go back home. If there necessarily wasn't any problems, any abuse in the home, then we want to transition them back to the home, and that's the best place for kids. About a third of our kids, 30% of our kids that we work with are PRT, which means their parental rights have been terminated. And so we had to find an alternative to that. It could be relative care, aunt and uncle, grandma, grandpa. It could be foster care. We have a foster care program. It could be a group home. If they're old enough, it could be independent living. So we're working with all these kids towards independent living skills. And so we want to determine what is going to be best for that child, and that's the discharge planning that we're working with the whole time that we're with us to get them towards this end goal. Okay? Yes, sir.
We live near White's.
Yes.
How do you compare to that?
That is an excellent organization. They are very well known for their foster care program. And we are actually looking and talking with them. We are really having a hard time to attract foster parents. And so we're looking at maybe partnering with White's, and our kids would then go to their foster parents. But we're probably a little, and I'm not quite sure about this, so don't hold me to task on it, please. Okay? We're probably a little better in residential care. They're a lot better in foster care than we are. We take our foster or our residential program. We take kids that are not accepted by a lot of other agencies in the state. We take really tough kids. They do what and I forget what the acronym, but they assign a score to all these kids and all the problems in their life. And we discharge kids with a higher score than a lot of agencies will even take in. Most of our kids have come from other agencies and been kicked out of. We've had kids that have been kicked out of 8, 10, 12 other places. So sometimes we're kind of the last resort. So we're comparable in what we do. I want to get back to your question. But I think we're probably better in residential care and they're better in foster care, but we're doing similar things, and they're doing great work. By any means, I may not, they do great work there, and that's why we would partner with them and work with them. Yes?
How far away from Bashor do you take foster parents?
Probably within an hour, I would say. Just because if you're farther than an hour, we're going into the home at least once, maybe twice a week. After an hour of driving to get someplace, it really takes up more time than possible benefit that we could have.
Why did you use Wani schools rather than Motion or Elkhart?
Because we're in the Wani School District. Crazy as it is, where we are at, I think we're closer to the Goshen schools, maybe probably even closer to Concord schools, but we are in the Wani School District. So, other questions? Yes. Oh, 3.
You're so entertaining. When you mentioned homeless, how many of those kids are homeless by choice? In other words, they're unhappy with their parents and they've given up on their parents. I'm not saying the parents haven't been involved. I'm saying, how many of these?
Probably half of the ones that we see have run away. Some have been abandoned. We had a lady. We found this young man on a park bench. He was a top 5 student at Concord. We found him on a park bench and got him into our shelter. His mom and 3 younger siblings moved to Chicago, and he had a part-time job at Taco Bell, and she thought he'd be okay. And so her and the other siblings moved to Chicago and left him here. And he had dropped out of school. He obviously hadn't showered in 3 days. He felt bad. He was eating very little. He had very little money. We got him into our shelter. We got him back enrolled in school. He finished in the top 10 at Concord. We took care of him. But think about the crossroads that he's in. He's on a park bench. What decisions do you make to survive? Would I steal? Probably. Would I get mixed up in drugs? Probably. Could I possibly become involved in human trafficking? Possibly. All those things are bigger options than the road that we got him back on if we weren't there to rescue him and get him into a safe place.
Are any of the kids ever, this is number 5 question, are any of the kids reunited with their parents?
Well, it depends. Again, whether it's a safe reunification. That's the number one thing that we always want to do, is get them back with their parents. But I guess the number one thing is we want to give them a safe future. We got to keep them safe. 2 is back to their families if we can. So it's all whether, it works out that way. Yes?
Are you still on the original 160-some acres?
Yep, never moved. We actually have about, 40 of it that we rent out to a farmer, so we still have room for growth if we need to. We rent it to a farmer, and he pays enough to pay the taxes on what it is, but it keeps using the ground, and it's there for us if we need it for future things.
How can we get involved? Just through our churches, if we want to get involved, supporting and recognizing what you've done.
Through,
By the way, I told you, we had a foster child.
Yes.
In 1973 and had him for 4 years.
Yep. Through the churches is a great way. Individually, if you'd like to know more about us, you saw some kind of pictures of our campus through that slideshow there. The number one thing I'll probably tell you, you drive up to our campus, you'll turn into the parking lot, and you'll go, wow, I didn't know it was all this. We have an awe-inspiring campus. They're nodding their head. They've been there and done that.
And it has changed.
Yeah. But through your churches is a great way. If you want to individually support, you can look on our website, www.bashor.org. Call me. You can just call our main number and ask for Steve. And if they ask which one, say the tall one. And just for the record, I'm only 5'22". She's good at math. I had a lady one time, she asked me that, and I said, I'm 5'22", and she argued with me. She said, you're taller than that. And I said, no, not really. I'm sorry. She started to yell at me. Any other questions? Thank you again for allowing me to be here and share our story. I appreciate it. And if you have any other questions or anything, come visit us. I hope that was good. I hope that's what you were expecting.
That was excellent.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody.
I'm so glad that he talked about the sex trafficking, because Rotary International has added sex trafficking to one of their major projects they work on worldwide. It is a very serious problem, and a very serious problem here in Indiana. And there's a group over in the Francisville, Maderryville area that does travel around the country, building homes and places for girls that have been sex trafficked. It's a really serious problem. Well, thank you very much. Now we're going to have our annual meeting. And a reminder, I don't know, Lisa, how many have gone into the room to look at the artifacts? Would you like to give them an idea in case they have time to step into that room?
In the, what we call the church parlor, we have a display. There's a very interesting pamphlet on the men's school and a scrapbook prepared by one of our members on the history of Trinity. If you are interested, you're welcome to go there.
Would you repeat what she said, please?
Okay, if you go into the parlor, it's right over there. Right over there, there are some of the history things from this church that are in there. I was looking at my agenda and wasn't listening that well to say what you had on display.
And there's a pamphlet from the next school also in there that's interesting. If you're interested.
Okay. Well, I'm going to call to order our annual meeting, and I can smell the food downstairs. We'll keep our meeting short. You'll have a few minutes to take a break. 11:30 is the luncheon for us, and all are welcome. Susan, do you have the secretary's report?
Yes. Can I be heard from here? Can you all hear me? All right. The annual meeting of the Historical Society was at Golden United Methodist Memorial Church. It began at 9:40 a.m. after some technical issues. Reverend Lisa, pastor of the Golden Church, welcomed the group and opened with prayer. Wesley Wilson, archivist emeritus at DePaul University, Indiana's United Methodist Archives, gave a presentation on the history of Govan Memorial UMC, which began in 1822 in homes in the area. Following the presentation and a short break, Shira Smith, a 2020 graduate of DePaul, gave a summary of her thesis, which is History of Camping in Indiana United Methodism. Through her digital presentation and her oral description, the group was given an interesting understanding of the church camps in Indiana since their beginning. This included camps that are no longer being used and the current 7 camps maintained by the Indiana United Methodist Conference. Shira indicated that she will let our organization know when her website concerning these camps, thank you, is live. Is it on? Okay. After questions and answer period, the group turned to the business meeting part of the day. The business meeting was brought to order by the interim president, Wesley Wilson, at 11:45 a.m. Secretaries reported the 2022 business session was read by the secretary, Susan Smith. Karen Schwartz moved to accept the minutes as written, and Lawrence Smith seconded. Motion passed. Treasurer's report was given by Don Brenneman. There is a current balance of $4,750.99 in the checkbook. Lawrence Smith moved to accept the report, and it was seconded and accepted by the group. Don also reported that there were currently 65 members belonging to the Historical Society. There were 30 people in attendance at the 2023 annual meeting.
New business. The bylaws had been publicized in the newsletter concerning changing the name of this organization to the Indiana Methodist Historical Society. This eliminated the word united, which better reflects the full extent of inclusion of Methodist and pre-Methodist churches in Indiana. The bylaw section was read and discussed. Joella Patterson moved to accept the motion to change the bylaws. Rick Gotchard, did I say your name right? Not right. Close enough. Okay. Seconded. A vote by show of hands was taken with 14 in favor of the motion to change the name of the Historical Society, eliminating the name United. There were three votes against, opposing the change. The motion passed. Don will do the paperwork with the state to make the official change. The list of officers was presented. President Sue Caldwell, Vice President Joseph Wood, Secretary Susan Smith, Treasurer Membership Secretary Donald Brenneman, at-large members Philip Emerson, Riley Case, and Karen Schwartz. There were no nominations from the floor. Doug Davies moved that the slate of officers be accepted. Rita Barnett seconded the motion, and it passed unanimously. Other business was brought up by Doug Davies, reminding the officers that a display from the Historical Society is usually at annual conference, and this display is done in conjunction with the ICCAH. The business meeting adjourned at 12:10 p.m., after which we proceeded downstairs to a delicious lunch provided by the ladies of the church. At 1:15, we gathered as a group to walk the few blocks to the new archives at DePaul University and of Indiana United Methodism, where Bethany Fichter met us. As the current archivist, Bethany presented before and after pictures of the archives and gave us a tour of the facilities. The meeting of the Indiana Methodist Historical Society adjourned close to 3 p.m. with people encouraged to browse the library at their leisure. It was discussed among the board that another meeting should be held soon to determine what is happening for the annual conference information table, and no date was set. Respectfully submitted, Susan Geis-Smith.
Thank you. Can we have an approval of the minutes? Are there any corrections? I don't think so. Somebody want to move that the minutes be accepted? Okay, we had, who did it over here? I heard somebody, I thought. Okay, David. Okay, and then Connie. Connie, can you second, change yours to a second? Peters. And Connie, can you second it? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, it's been accepted. Treasurer's report. Don? Do you want to come up here and use the...
We've got 5,099.34.
We're in good financial shape.
Give me the number again.
5,099.34. Same number of members as last year. Let's see here. Is Stuart Negley here? Okay. Rosemary Draga. I've got it. Yeah, thanks. Wes Wilson, Joe Wood. Janet Kingman, okay.
Janet's not a member, but she's
Oh,
here
that's
as a
right.
member of the, she's a member of the Historical Society.
Good.
She's here.
Okay. Everything's there on that form.
Okay, can we have a motion to accept the financial report?
So moved.
Okay, Arlen, second for that?
Second.
David again? Okay, thank you. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I'd like to
Print.
make a motion that we give
I think that's a very good choice. Do we have a second to that motion? Has David seconded it? All in favor?
What's the amount?
200 or whatever.
I would like to amend it to 5.
I think
Got the money.
it's very good.
Rephrase it, whatever comes up, because we don't catch it.
Okay, we have a suggestion that we rephrase the motion and make it $500 donation to Bashor Home. And we're certainly in good position to do that. So can we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passed. Thank you. Under President's report, we did put up a display at the Methodist State Conference last year on Eleanor. And probably this year we'll probably do the same thing. We are, David's waiting for a call to find out if the 5 sites associated with Eleanor is still waiting. Okay. Will be named Heritage Landmark Sites. This is a very big event for us in Rensselaer when this happens. We know it's going to happen before the end of the conference. We just don't know when it's going to come up in their schedule. So if anyone hears, let us know and we'll make a big announcement of it. And then we'll probably do something about the 5 sites at the next state conference then, and when that's in June, I can't remember, 6th or something like that. Okay, new business. We have election of the board, and I have a list on. You can see the names on your list. The only thing I did, I put Wesley Wilson as vice president, and I don't think I'm allowed to do that, okay, without changing our bylaws. But I think it's something that we should consider making the vice president a member of the board, because they do add a lot to it. Wesley, I thought, was going to be here, so I'm disappointed he isn't here today. But I think we have to change the bylaws in order to do it, or else maybe I could make an appointment. Does anyone know? So we'll have to check into that. And I don't remember. We'll have to figure that out. But anyways, we have President Sue Caldwell, Vice President Joseph Wood, Secretary Lisa Black, with Treasurer Don Brenneman, at-large member Doug Davies, at-large member Karen Swartz, and at-large member Riley Case. Could we have like a second to the motion? I move that these all be nominated or elected to office. Can we have a second? Okay, go ahead. Okay, and Connie seconded it. All in favor? All opposed? We have a couple of changes in this year, and I would like to mention that Phil Amerson is going off the board. He's been on the board for quite a long time. We do thank him for his service. Lisa Black will be taking Susan Smith's. Unfortunately, she has had to leave us, and but she'll be a member of this organization. I hope continue. And Connie is giving up the job as our newsletter editor, and Rick Gottschall has offered to accept that job, so we're in good hands there. Next thing, I want Rich to talk, because the 2005 annual meeting will be held in his church.
Next year will mark the 200th anniversary of Methodism in Franklin, Indiana, not in Johnson County. That goes back 2 years earlier than that. But the Franklin Church, the first Methodist circuit rider, arrived there in 1824. So 2024 will be our bicentennial. And last year I invited the Historical Society to meet there next year as part of our bicentennial celebration. And this meeting next year will actually be the first official activity in our bicentennial celebration. It'll lead up to basically a fall homecoming weekend in the fall. The Franklin Church got its name in the last Sunday in September in 1874, and the church was built on the design of Indianapolis Grace Methodist Church, and so it came to be called the Franklin Grace Methodist Church, and that name stuck. So the last Sunday in September for our church is basically Grace Sunday, and that's when we'll have our homecoming celebration. We have since moved out of that building. We moved out of there in 1965 due to parking, which is interesting to read the history of this church and to see how parking influences a lot of decisions. So I'll have some information then about next year about the history of the church. I've just finished writing the bicentennial history of the church. Right now it's just at 200 pages, and we'll be publishing that late this year probably. I have to get the copyright on it, and well, the final edit and then the copyright. The date, I don't remember the exact date. It's Palm Sunday weekend.
I think it's April 12th, isn't it?
I think that's it.
Yes.
One of the talks that day I'll be giving is about chaplains in the Civil War, particularly Methodist chaplains. And to give you a little teaser, I've written some notes based on my research to this point. During the Civil War, 3,694 ministers were duly commissioned as chaplains in the Union or Confederate armies. In the Union Army, 38% of chaplains were Methodists, followed by Presbyterians at 17%, and Baptists 12%. 11 chaplains were killed in action, including John R. Eddy of the 72nd Indiana Infantry, who was, by contemporary reports, nearly obliterated by a solid military round in June 1863. He had been with his unit only 8 days on the front lines. Many more died from disease during the war or from the effects of their service shortly after the war's end. Most chaplains served less than 2 years, some as short as 60 days, others served through the entire war. And in my talk, I'm going to focus on 3 specific chaplains. One, a man named John Hogarth Lozier, really colorful character. I think you'll enjoy his life story. He served from, well, he tried to volunteer the day after Fort Sumter, but they weren't taking married men, so he had to wait until the second round. Another is John Haight, and the third was from the Franklin Church, and he served as a non-commissioned, as a member of the Christian Commission. In Indiana, 72 Methodist ministers and 1 United Brethren minister served as military chaplains. In addition, at least 8 Indiana Methodist ministers served with the Christian Commission. But these records are really spotty, and I've not been able to find any solid list of members of the Christian Commission who actually served on battlefront units or in hospitals. So that number of 8 is likely much, much smaller than the actual number. Chaplains' presence in frontline military units was not always greeted warmly by commanding officers. Reverend John Haight of the 55th Indiana Infantry said of his commanding officer, and this is from his memoir, "Though friendly during the introductory interview, he plainly showed that in the person of the new chaplain, he had regimental equipment that he was at a loss to do what to do with. But the attitude of rank-and-file soldiers is best reflected by this assessment of the Reverend Lyman S. Crittenden of the 67th Indiana. He was the right man in the right place, and the boys can never forget his kind services. He was faithful in season and out of season, faithful all the time. His work was not confined to his own regiment, but throughout the camp. Wherever a soldier, whether sick or well or dying, needed his services, he was there at the post of duty. With a smile and cheerful greeting, "Well, boys, how do you do?" and a warm fraternal grasp of the hand, he scattered sunshine wherever he went.
Well, thank you, and I hope all of you will attend. I'm interested in this because my great-grandfather, Reverend Milton Jacob Sleppy, was in the Civil War, and his brother died at Fredericksburg. So I'm kind of interested in hearing that talk he's going to give next year. Connie?
Sunday is April 13th next year, so
It's the 12th, yes. Okay, do we have any other announcements or comments that need to be made before we close our meeting? Well, it's perfect timing to get downstairs and get some food. Okay. Huh? Would you like to do that?
well, and let's move that the meeting be closed.
Okay, yes.
Move that the meeting be closed at 11:24.
A second, I don't think we need a second, but let's second it. Okay. Second, okay. Okay. Was there someone who would like to give a little short prayer before the luncheon?
The senior pastor is here. Larry was ordained a year before I was. I'll be happy to.
Very good, Larry. And Larry, you might mention what churches you two served at.
Right outside of Rensselaer, Markland, of course, you can leave. We were served at those two places.
Let's bow our heads. Gracious Lord, we thank you. We thank you that you give us the opportunity to follow those who've gone before us with faithfulness, with love, and with loving gratitude for what you have done in their lives and the way in which you have received them into salvation in the lives and in the life to come. Lord, we ask that you would be with us as we continue to be together in fellowship and help us to continue to learn from others that we might stand on the foundations that they have built for us and continue to create a history of your word and faithfulness to you in the days to come. So let us now join together in enjoying the food, and we thank you for the hands that prepare it for us and to make it possible for us to gain strength from it. But more importantly, Lord, may we continue to reach out to you as we seek strength in all the decisions of our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And before we go, I would like to remind you, we've got an hour here for lunch. Try to come to the museum around 12:30, and we can give you directions to head that way. It's a nice day. You might even want to walk. It is several blocks down there, though. What was I going to say? Anyways, we do have some displays over there, Old Methodist Church records, a lot of information on Helena for you to look at. And then we will have a speech by Lisa Black. We'll hear about Reverend George Payne first, and then Lisa Black's got a very interesting talk for this afternoon. And I hope you'll all stay and enjoy it.
Can you give us the directions now? Since we're all here.
Go 1 block west, you'll see the Carnegie Center, turn right at Carnegie Center, and it's about 2.5 blocks more.
And the streets involved are? What streets?
This is Abigail Street. Take Abigail to Van Rensselaer, turn right. But there'll be enough parking there aren't that many cars. I think we can make it. Okay, let's go enjoy the meal.